Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. Parents can send instant money transfers, automate allowance, and more. Plus, keep an eye on spending with real-time notifications. Join more than 6 million parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get your first month free at greenlight.com/ACAST. That's greenlight.com/ACAST.
There's never been a faster or easier way to start your weight loss journey than with PlushCare. PlushCare accepts most insurance plans and gives you online access to board-certified physicians who can prescribe FDA-approved weight loss medications like Wegovy and Zepbound for those who qualify. Take charge of your health and speak with a board-certified physician about a weight loss plan that's right for you. Get started today at plushcare.com/weight loss. That's plushcare.com/weight loss. plushcare.com/weight loss.
One size fits all seems like a good idea for clothes until you try them on. Same goes for healthcare. That's why United Healthcare offers flexible, budget-friendly coverage for medical, vision, dental, and more. Learn more at uh1.com.
Pursuing your future doesn't end at 40. In fact, it may mark the beginning of knowing who you are, what you're capable of, and what you really want. But knowing what's next and how to get there can be a challenge, especially when old narratives play on repeat. Liberty Road is here to share stories so that you can consider your possibilities, pursue your purpose, and move into your future with intention. I'm your host, Netta Jones, and we're here to listen, learn, and liberate dreams, one episode at a time. Well, hello, Liberty listeners. Welcome to another episode of Liberty Road. Today, you guys get to hear from somebody who's going to talk to us about something we don't always feel comfortable talking about, but we need to be talking about. I'm so excited to have Gabriella Espinosa on the show with us today. Gabriella, welcome. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here with you, Netta.
So tell us, what is this conversation that you are trying to bring awareness around?
Well, I'm trying to bring awareness around female pleasure and knowing that it's never too late. You're never too old, and it has no expiration date to really tap into this unlimited source of pleasure that we innately have within us. My journey with this work started around 15 years ago when perimenopause came along totally unannounced.
Rude.
Yeah, very rude. I always say it was like a light switched off, and I was left totally in the dark, especially when it came to pleasure and sexuality. You know, I thought I was doing all the right things, all the things that had been displayed on Hollywood movies and Cosmo magazine. But my husband and I had a very short courtship and went from this very fiery, passionate, can't take our hands off each other kind of courtship when you first fall in love, to getting married and then going straight into having 3 children, all in the span of 5 years. Meeting to getting married to having 3 kids in 5 years. It was really fast. I was approaching my 40s. So there was this message, this from inside my body, these whispers, right? They were saying, you gotta do it now. You gotta do it now. It's now or never. And so I was in my 40s when I was done with kids and went straight from childbirthing to breastfeeding and play dates right into perimenopause without having any clue that that's what was happening. I had the telltale signs, this sense of anxiety and just sort of impending doom, constantly worrying about my kids, panic attacks, heart palpitations, and then just my libido tanked. And then I had no understanding or language to communicate with my partner, with my doctor, or even my girlfriends. They all seemed to be doing just fine. Yeah. And there was this enormous sense of shame. I felt, am I getting old? Is my sex life over? That's what I really, really thought. And so I decided to take pleasure into my own hands and spent the following 15 years traveling around the world, learning from renowned sexuality experts, embodiment experts focusing on conscious sexuality and tantra and mindfulness, and just researching and exploring the most powerful mind-body tools to tap into this innate pleasure that we all have that I talk about. And so that led me, they often say, right, that you, especially in this field of wellness, you often give others the healing that you often were so looking for.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's what led me to this work, being a midlife and sexual wellness coach. I focus on that midlife transition because I'm a midlife woman myself. And I feel that there's so much change happening at this time. You know, our bodies are changing, our hormones are changing, our relationships are changing. And I feel midlife can be a new chapter in our sexual lives, but that's not really very clear to many of us. And I really want to guide women to awaken that newfound pleasure within ourselves and our relationships so we can feel more confident both in and out of the bedroom, and really allow women to feel that pleasure is not selfish or indulgent. And it's essential not only for our sexual well-being, but for our overall health, happiness, and longevity.
We got to unpack that one too. So
Yes.
First of all, thank you for doing the work that you're doing. I think many of us, not just in menopause, but this particular generation is new to this conversation, right? Hopefully our children won't feel that way. This is something that they're going to grow up in. So part of your work must be to find language that people are comfortable with, to get people to be comfortable with this idea of a discussion around pleasure without snickering or without feeling what you said earlier, that it might be self-indulgent. So I'm curious, what are some of the things that you're hearing from people, the resistance that you're hearing, or the maybe even shame around it that you're sensing when you're working with people in our generation and in this season of life?
Well, you named it, right? There is a lot of fear, a lot of resistance, a lot of shame. And that's really usually where I start with women. I mean, a lot of women come to me and they say, I just don't feel like myself anymore. I've lost that spark. I want, some of them are in partnerships, long-term partnerships. I love my partner. I want, but I'm just not in the mood. I just can't be bothered. It feels like a chore. And so a lot of it starts with, I love to start with the level of your nervous system, right? A lot of us are constantly in this flight, fight, or freeze mode, constantly doing in productivity mode versus just being in this place of surrender or feeling that you're worthy of receiving pleasure. And a lot of it starts with some of the inherited narratives that I call them, that we internalized as we were moving through womanhood. And they often start in our family of origin. They start with our peers. They start in the media. They start in Hollywood. So much of that gets layered within ourselves. And it's really there that I start. I'm peeling some of those narratives. I'm peeling some of those feelings of shame and fear, and getting women to feel safe and at home in their body. So I guide them to understand, to befriend their nervous systems, to understand how their nervous systems operate. I work with a lot of practices to activate the vagus nerve, move you into a parasympathetic state, so a rest and relax state. Really being able to recognize when you're in that flight mode, that fight mode, that freeze mode, or even that fawning mode, where you are literally giving your pleasure away to your partner. Up to 70% of women admit to faking orgasms, and a lot of them do say that when they come to me. So just knowing when they're in there, understanding those different nervous system states, and developing this internal awareness, what I call interoception, which is the sixth sense, that there are a lot of studies in, a lot of research in neuroscience that's pointed to this ability to feel within our bodies, thoughts, sensations, emotions, feelings, and then develop a language around that. So it's first developing the awareness of what's going on internally, developing a language. So sensations, one of my teachers says, sensations are the poetry of the body. So being able to articulate what those sensations are. I'm feeling wired and tired. I'm feeling a sense of contraction at my heart center. I feel butterflies in my tummy. It could be anything, but just being able to name it. I feel we often gravitate to these big overarching descriptors of how we're feeling. I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, I'm tired. And those are perfectly legitimate, but underneath that, there's a more nuanced feeling state. And that's what I like women to access. And it all starts with an awareness, this interoceptive ability, or that listening to your body that you hear a lot. That's what listening to your body is.
There is so much that you just said that I'm like, where do I start to unpack? But one of the things that I heard you say when we use these overarching words is actually that we're disconnected from ourselves and we're using common language to articulate what we think we might be feeling, but we're actually not as in touch as you would recommend we be to actually be able to articulate what's going on with us. And if we don't know, then we can't heal. If we don't know what we're dealing with, then we can't work through that. So the work that you're doing is to help us physically and emotionally find language for those feelings, but we have to calm ourselves. I have to ask you, because clearly you've done your work. Clearly you know what you're talking about. Where did you come from? What was the career that you had before, the work that you did before 15 years ago when you launched into this pleasure seeking and understanding space?
Well, I was in a totally different career track. I started off in nonprofits and then corporate, more on the PR and marketing side of things. And then I, as I told you, became a mom. It all happened very quick and fast. And I felt I needed to take a break and focus on motherhood and really figure out what I wanted to do next. I knew that my own system, I recognized then that my own nervous system didn't have the capacity to do all the things. I couldn't, I so badly wanted to go back to work. I so badly wanted to stay home with my children, but I knew I just could not get myself to do both. I didn't have that capacity. And so that was one thing that I recognized. I had seen my mother mirror trying to do it all and it didn't look very healthy. It didn't look very healthy. And I think it kind of left an imprint on me. It left an imprint on my own nervous system that left me feeling with little capacity to manage everything, even though my situation was very different from my mother's. My mother was a single mom trying to make ends meet and raise 3 daughters, right? And my situation was very, very different. I was in a stable marriage. I had an education. I was financially stable. I had support. But I just knew that my nervous system was a little bit more sensitive and that I just didn't have that capacity. So long story short, I took time off to become a mom. And that's when 5 years into it that I started my perimenopause journey and everything kind of started falling through the cracks. My ability to cope with day-to-day life, my libido, as I mentioned, did. And it really just took a lot of soul searching into those patterns that I inherited that were imprinted in my nervous system. That's why I always start with the nervous system, realizing that I didn't have a language. Anything that had to do with my reproductive health, my sexual health, my sexuality had been silenced and shamed for the majority of my life. They say, right, when you move into the perimenopause stage, like all the curtains are peeled back.
Yeah.
The veil of estrogen is peeled back as it starts to decline, and all of whatever you've been suppressing, pushing down, is revealed. And that was what was revealed. And that started what I call, the inner work, my own inner work of menopause. So it's been a journey. And I started off as a yoga teacher, a breathwork teacher, developing that muscle of awareness, which I so mentioned, that interoceptive ability. That was truly a gift from my yoga practice. So I started off as a yoga teacher, mindfulness teacher, meditation teacher, and then trained as a nutritional therapist. And then, as I told you, started diving into this field of female pleasure and really fine-tuning the tools to access my pleasure. But it all really starts with that muscle of awareness, through that lens of awareness.
Yeah. I want to say a few things that you just called out, maybe for your sake, but for the sake of our listeners too. When you said you didn't have the capacity, I want to just reframe that. What it sounded to me like is you actually had the wisdom to not repeat what you saw your mother do and to make a choice for yourself that was good for you. I didn't see it as somebody who didn't have capacity. I saw it as somebody who knew herself and made a choice that was best for her. And
thank you.
I truly do. And I think it's important for our listeners to hear that. When we think of this superwoman model that was given to us, to Gen X in particular, the ability to say, I think that's a little bit of a lie, and that cape is tattered and torn. So to me, what I think you represent is somebody who could see clearly that doing all the things wasn't not just good for you, but perhaps it's just not what's required to live a full life and to thrive. I also think that when you were talking about your career, starting out in PR and in the corporate world, for women who are listening to hear that you are able to make a wildly different jump at some other point in your life, I think is really worth pausing and taking in. You're an example of somebody who started off on one track, left for a moment to be a mother. This is like so many of our listeners, and are now trying to figure out what's next. And in your what's next, you were healing yourself. And then, as you said at the top of the podcast, and in turn, giving that back to others. So you started with yourself. What is it that I need? What is it that Gabriella needs? What is it that I'm searching for? And then we're able to, in service, give that to us. And I think it's just a great example of what we get to do in midlife if we're really paying attention. You're a poster child for it. So thank you for sharing that story.
Thank you so much for that witnessing and that observation.
Yeah,
I sometimes don't give myself enough credit.
No, I think we don't. No, I think we don't. And I don't think you're alone. I think a lot of us don't. And I just really wanted to call it out so you could hear it and so our listeners could hear it.
Thank you.
Tell us specifically what your offerings are. We know a little bit of what you're trying to accomplish with each person that comes your way that you're coaching. How do you work with these people? What are the things that the platforms you offer to work with them?
So I offer one-to-one and group coaching programs and retreats. So I developed a 6-module course called the Pleasure Upgrade, which takes you through this 3-month journey where I offer you this roadmap of, again, beginning with, we can call it befriending your nervous system, or developing the emotional resilience tools, of developing that interoceptive awareness, of being able to listen to your body, recognize those thoughts, sensations, emotions, being able to own them and honor them, and create a beautiful language with which to own them, and then communicate what you're feeling. And then to also shift your feeling state. So there are different breath practices, movement practices, journaling practices. I am a mirror or a witness, just like you are, like you just did now, to clients, so that they can really see, themselves as they truly are, and recognize and give themselves credit for the work that they're doing. And then we move into removing some of those narratives, shame, fear, really stepping into courage, right? It really takes a lot of courage to meet yourself anew as a sexual being. And I think that's a lot of what we have to do in midlife. Our bodies have changed, our desires have changed, our relationships are changing. And it really takes seeing ourselves anew, asking ourselves, who am I as a sexual being? And really redefining it for yourself, not who it was when you were 20, 30, or even 40, not who, Cosmo tells you should be, or Hollywood tells you who you should be, but really, really tapping into what does that mean for you, and you get to redefine it however you like. And so we start with what I call a self-pleasure practices. And it's very, very slow and gradual, just befriending your body through gentle movement. I incorporate breath, somatic movement. Somatics is that journey of traveling into your inner world and feeling those sensations, thoughts, emotions, and acknowledging them. So I do a lot of somatic movement practice, a lot of vagus nerve practices to bring you into that parasympathetic state, using the power of touch. So getting really comfortable with being at home in your body. And we don't start in a sexual way at all. It's just, again, just being comfortable with being in your body. So many women come to me with body confidence issues, body image issues that make them turn away from pleasure, that make them turn away from really loving themselves more. And so we start there. And then we gradually move into getting to know your pleasure anatomy. So it's pleasure anatomy 101. Really get to know yourself. Take a mirror, meet yourself where you are. We go very, very slowly. I give you the practices so you do them at home by yourself. And this is where I see women meet a lot of resistance within themselves.
Sure.
And that fear and those feelings of shame come up. But we work very gradually and slowly. But when you're able to meet yourself there, it's transformational. Women realize that they are able to, access pleasure in ways that they never knew how. So it's really about getting to know yourself first, know what lights you up, making it a daily practice or a weekly practice. It doesn't take very long. It can take 3 minutes. It can take 5 minutes. It can take up to an hour, however long you have. And not really having it be goal oriented. I think a lot of women today, we have busy lives. We want to do all the things.
Yeah.
And it seems to be very goal oriented. I want the thing to get me from A to Z now in 1 week. So I can tell you that no pill, no patch, no hormone is going to get you there. You can do all those things. And I actually have collaborated with doctors who have a focus on sexual medicine. I've worked with a doctor in the UK, Dr. Shazadi Harper, who on my online platform gives lectures on sexual wellness. So lectures on all the constellation of symptoms around GSM, genitourinary syndrome of menopause, because a lot of those things often can stop us, block us from accessing our pleasure. So we do it in tandem, go and address whatever physical issues there are, physiological issues. But at the same time, you can start very, very slowly accessing those other pleasure access points in the body. So it's about sexual wellness as well as accessing deep sexual pleasure that your body holds. So I go in tandem. I think it's so important in midlife, as we know, so much is changing. So it's about honoring where you are, knowing that things change and addressing that, but also knowing there is a path to go forward in terms of accessing deeper, more fulfilling pleasure.
Yeah, I am struck by your work and how it seems unique from some of the messages that are out there right now around pleasure, which is, here's a vibrator, here's a lubricant, and you do you. And it's distinct from what you're talking about. It's a little like kitschy and in your face and like, we deserve this and women power, blah, 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 which I'm not saying is not necessarily needed or true. But what you're bringing to us, this practice, is a practice of knowing ourselves. And I think that's a really important distinction. You are bringing to us understanding our physical bodies, understanding our emotional and physical needs, and doing the foundational work to get to that next level and to better understand what it is that we actually need, what it is that is actually blocking us from that need. It's just very powerful. I'm so glad we're having this conversation. I'm so glad you're doing the work that you're doing, because it's easy to scroll through Instagram and see 5 reasons why you should own your pleasure. It's an altogether different thing to be going deep within and learning how to love yourself well. And I don't mean that in the sexual way. I mean that in the knowing oneself way.
Absolutely.
I'm really struck by how I didn't know that was going to come up in this conversation. I'm so pleased that it has.
Yeah, no, self-pleasure, I see it is, as you say, it's a beautiful way to get to know yourself and to orient to what feels good to you, holding yourself with compassion. And, don't get me wrong, I'm all for advocating for having the O's and the use of vibrators.
Yeah.
But if you're already feeling disconnected, numb, overwhelmed, exhausted, the thrill of a quick fix can leave you feeling even more depleted and unsatisfied. So,
and disconnected from a partner if you have a partner, right?
Absolutely. Yes. And again, there's a whole conversation you can have about introducing vibrators in the bedroom and partnership, and there's definitely a space for them.
Yeah.
But I feel a self-pleasure practice connects you to your whole body, not just the parts we associate with orgasms, and invites that deeper knowing of what lights you up. So there's no right way. I say there's no right way or wrong way to self-pleasure because it's guided by what feels good to you. And it's such an empowering way to own your pleasure and communicate your needs and desires.
Thank you for making all those distinctions. I'm learning along with our listeners. It's awesome. Go back to some of the issues that you talked about that are most common. You talked about fear. You talked about shame. What would you say are the ways that perhaps you've addressed some of those things where you've seen breakthrough, where you've seen women who are able to see themselves in a different way? Is it after doing the multi-week course with you? Is it something that you say to them that helps them, just like this conversation with me, that's helping me to rethink how I'm looking at sexual wellness and sexual pleasure? Like, where do you see breakthrough?
That's such a great question. And it does take a mindset shift, and it really is about seeing this time for yourself, this time where you engage in self-pleasure or even in intimacy with a partner, really seeing it, I can't think of another word, but sacred, right? Sacred, as really a place of honor and awe and wonder at really what our bodies can do and what they're capable of doing. And so just creating a sacred container. And it could just be a little thing. It can be just lighting a candle. It can be putting on your favorite piece of music. I love making playlists for my clients. Just moving your body, just having a little dance, a little movement with yourself. It can be being out in nature. It can be just noticing those sensations. What are my eyes taking in? What are the sensations of my breath flowing in and out? How does it feel to move my body? And just being present to your body when you're feeling those sensations. So it's a process of tuning up the awareness of what you're feeling in the moment, of what feels good. And all of this helps us to orient towards experiencing more pleasure both in and out of the bedroom. So just seeing it as a moment of coming into communion with yourself. I don't mean to use all of this sort of religious or spiritual.
No. There is something about it that is very spiritual.
It is very spiritual, and is because it is a deeper relationship with yourself, and that's just so beautiful and just very life-changing for so many people when they realize that. And again, it means removing that sort of goal-oriented, I have to get from here to there. And so it takes time. Another word also I think for sacred is just honoring yourself, honoring the space, honoring the container that you're setting aside for yourself, honoring your body. And it's a journey, and it takes time, it takes patience, but it is, I feel, a radical act of self-love in a world where we're constantly doing instead of being. I think it's so necessary.
Yeah, I would agree. I agree. I'm so excited for our listeners to check out the work you're doing. By the way, they can, you guys can all check out GabriellaEspinosa.com. We'll have everything in the show notes for you. What are some of the immediate steps that those people who don't have access to you, perhaps can't do your coaching, what would you like to share with them here on the podcast that are some immediate things they can do to get past some of those issues you brought up and reclaim that healthy sexual relationship with themselves and their partners?
There's so many things I'd like to add, so many ways to start. Well, one of the things is just journaling, right? What does pleasure mean to me? What is my relationship to pleasure? Really having it be this self-inquiry. What are my desires? A lot of women that I work with don't even know what they desire. So I have, and I can make it available to all your listeners. It's called my Pleasure Body Journal. So there's 7 journaling prompts that take you into this journey of inquiry, of self-inquiry. It really starts with that, right? Getting to know yourself. So again, what does pleasure mean to me? What do I want it to feel and look like? What are my desires? What is my relationship to my body? And how do I experience pleasure in my body? And it can be for now, right now. How do you experience pleasure now? It could be a walk in nature. It could be going to the gym, and that's fine now. It could be a big sleep in, but just starting that, acknowledging how, just owning that word pleasure, right? Without societal messaging that we get around pleasure. It's often like going straight to what is sexual or erotic or sensual. And it does intersect with that. But I want women to realize that pleasure can just start with connecting to yourself in a very conscious level, honoring yourself through a very compassionate and lens of acceptance. And so just meeting yourself where you are right now and starting that process of self-inquiry is a great way to start. And then, starting that self-pleasure practice is a great way, getting to know your body. And it's a step-by-step process. In the link that I'll provide your listeners, there is a little guided practice, breath practice that they can start with, gradually tuning into that interoceptive ability of tuning into their inner state. And just, be free, feel free to incorporate a little bit of movement, a little bit of breath, a little bit of sound in your self-pleasure practice. It doesn't have to go to the genitals. It doesn't have to start there. Sometimes with my clients, we spend weeks just with that, connecting to our inner selves and noticing those sensations and just getting out of our heads and into our bodies, right? That's where I want women to start. So, and it's so fun.
I'm so sure.
Fun. Once you start it, you're like, oh my God, why don't I do this more often? It's like going to the gym when you resist. And once you're there and you get started, you're like, oh my God, why don't I do this more often? It felt so good. That's what it feels like when you start a self-pleasure practice.
Well, thank you for your willingness to share some of those things with our listeners. And listeners, we will have all of those links for you. And also just for giving us, I think, new context, a new kind of a mind shift, a new paradigm to look at what does pleasure mean? How do we, when you were saying the journaling thing, I was like, that's tough to sit down and really think about what does pleasure mean to me? That's a tough exercise because it can feel, to your earlier point, self-indulgent in a season where many of us are just used to giving, or being productive. Even if we're doing something for ourselves, it's like it's a productivity thing versus I'm supposed to carve out time to be thinking about myself in this way. But what a sacred practice, right? To be able to carve out that time for yourself. So thank you for so many tools. Lots of gems in that.
You're welcome.
Before we let you go, we have to do our Fast Five. So I want to ask you, what is a daily practice that keeps you grounded?
My breath practice. The breath is always there for me, for all of us. So I do a little simple breath practice. I include a mindfulness of breathing practice in the little link that I share with your listeners. I start there, and walks in nature. That's where I start. That keeps me grounded. Anytime during the day, I always pause to tap into my breath, perhaps just look out into the trees, my garden, and that's always keeps me grounded. That's where I usually start.
Awesome. I'm excited to get that breathwork exercise. And what are you currently reading?
Oh, well, I listened to your podcast interview with Sharon Malone, and I have here, I love her book. I quickly went and ordered her book, Grown Woman Talk. I'm a wellness junkie. I'll read every book that comes out on wellness and sexuality and menopause. That's where I am right now, just learning. And I love her story. As a Black woman, a lot of it resonates with me. I mean, I'm not a Black woman. My family of origin is from Latin America, but some of those, some of the stories she tells resonate with my own experience or my own family of origin. And I love the playlist that she gives in every chapter, because I'm a music playlist junkie as well. So loving that book, and I loved your interview with her.
Thank you, Gabriella.
Woman.
She's a gem, isn't she?
Such a wise woman. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really special. I mean, we have her medical expertise to be sure, but there is something very wise and very grounded about who she is.
I've had the pleasure of meeting her in person. I've actually sat across her at a dinner table, and oh my gosh, her presence is just magnetic. It's just magnetic, and she sees you. Yeah. As an equal, I feel. It's so beautiful to be in her presence.
Ah, what a lovely thing to say about somebody. I hope she gets to hear this. And then what's one piece of advice that you give women when they tell you, this is not a one-piecer, but if you can come up with one piece of advice that you tell them when they say to you, I have no more desire for sex?
I say, have courage. So courage, is not the absence of fear. It's just doing the thing in the face of fear. And this means meeting yourself anew as a sexual being and beginning that self-pleasure practice, with little baby steps. Start a self-pleasure practice with the baby steps I outlined earlier. Breath, movement, self-touch, and meeting yourself where you are right then. And have courage. Yeah. It does take courage.
Great. That's great. And we've talked about midlife. We've talked about perimenopause and this season of life. What is it that you are enjoying about it? What are you loving about this particular season? What is it bringing you that no other stage of life has brought?
I have loved being able to free my voice to talk about these issues that have been silenced and shamed for so long. For so long, I thought my voice didn't matter. For so long, it was holding in all of these things with, a certain degree of shame. And so I just love having released all of that shame and just freeing my voice, using my platform to empower other women. As you know, I've started my own podcast, Pleasure in the Pause, and I'm having so much fun with that. Being able to have these conversations, one of the things, aside from actually engaging in pleasure, is actually talking about it. I love talking about it, and inviting other experts onto the show who give their perspectives on female pleasure is just so much fun for me right now. So I love using my voice to communicate that and share that with others.
This is probably going to roll right into the next question, but what is it about the work that you're doing, about the podcast, Pleasure in the Pause? It's a great name. What is it about those two things that is liberating to you?
Freeing my voice, as I mentioned, and just sharing this information that I feel like I've been holding secret, I've been guarding. It's like, it's been mine, and it's helped me step into my power and my pleasure. And I'm like, no, I want to give this to the world. I want to give this to other women. So, before I felt it was, I was shy about doing that. I felt it was a bit too woo and too out there. I thought women are not going to understand the message that I bring, but I'm just sharing it. And I hope that, if it resonates with one woman who listens to this, I'll be delighted. But it's really being able to witness other women understanding, just like you have, right? It's given me such a pleasure to hear you be a mirror to my own voice, to the work that I do today in this conversation. And I love that. So thank you so much for, appreciating and understanding the work that I'm trying to bring forth in the world. It's so beautiful. Thank you so much.
It is a pleasure, no pun intended. It has been a pleasure to talk to you. I feel like I've learned so much. I know our listeners have, and I just want to encourage you, or maybe applaud you, because you've already done the work of stepping out and not withholding that for yourself and taking something that perhaps felt woo-woo or even risque and using it, again, using your story in service of others. Because I think this is your secret sauce, Gabriella. What you are talking about can be, for some, assaulting. Like, whoa, that's too much. I don't know what to do with that. The way you address it, the way you speak about it as being honoring, as being sacred, as being in communion with ourselves, strips all of that assaultingness away. And you are spoon feeding us something that we need in a way that is not just palatable, it's digestible. So whatever you're doing, keep it up, because lives are going to be transformed. Women are going to come into contact with who they are in a deeper way because of your work. So well done.
Thank you so much. That's such a beautiful way to witness.
You are so welcome. And Liberty listeners, thank you guys for hanging out with Gabriella and with me. It's been so, I'm like, I have new information, and I know you guys feel that way too. And we'll have all of Gabriella's links, the links that she has kindly offered to share, in the show notes. So it's all going to be there for you. And we will talk to you guys again next week. Bye for now. Liberty Road is broadcast on all platforms: Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcast, and more. If you like what you've heard, please follow, rate, and review Liberty Road on Apple Podcast and Spotify. It helps us to know if these episodes are inspiring and equipping you to move into your middle third with intention. Liberty Road is created by executive producer Netta Jones, supervising producer Elizabeth Wyndham, producer Julia Wyndham, and music by Jack Jones.